roots of Orthodox spirituality.
Lord, have mercy, Lord, have mercy.
A wondrous journey into Orthodoxy.
Lord, have mercy.
Prepared and presented by Angeliki Antonakou Lekea.
Lord have mercy, 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 Lord have mercy. Lord have mercy, 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 Lord have mercy.
Hello, dear listeners. We are continuing to read from the book Spiritual Struggle, the third volume in the series Spiritual Counsels by Saint Paisios.
And let the lifting up of my hands be an evening sacrifice.
Anything can be overcome through obedience. Yeroda, how can someone be helped when he imagines that there is something wrong with him? To be helped, one must have a spiritual father, someone he can trust and be obedient to. He will share his thoughts with his spiritual guide and receive the appropriate guidance. Pay no attention to this, watch out for that, and so forth. If he has no trust and does not obey, he will not be able to dispel his negative thoughts. Do you know what it means to be asked for help by people who do nothing to help themselves? A young man who lives a disorderly life, who has psychosomatic illnesses, and is tormented in soul, comes to me with bloodshot eyes from too much smoking and asks me to help him. He also has a false piety and requests that I give him the icon from the iconostasis as a blessing, yet enters the keli with a cigarette. A keli cell is a self-sufficient, isolated monastic dwelling consisting of a building with a chapel and the land surrounding it. It is usually situated near a monastery and is dependent on it. It does not belong to a skiti and is bigger than a kalivi. I tell him, "Look here, your eyes are bloodshot like a poor dog with rabies. Not even old men are permitted to smoke in this keli. I burn incense in here." He continued to do his own thing, coming to ask for help, and doing nothing to abandon his own fixations and habits. "Why don't you make me well?" he asks. He wants to become well through some magical means, without himself making any effort of any kind. So I tell him, "You don't need a miracle. You are not really sick. You simply believe in and rely on your own thoughts." If he could only have obeyed, he would have received some help. I have observed that one who listens and obeys can make progress and do well. He and his own family can then be content and peaceful. Once a priest went to a monastery and they told him to chant, but he refused. "Why don't you chant?" they asked him. "Because the psalm says, 'Let the high praises of God be in their mouth and a two-edged sword in their hand.'" Psalm 149 verse 6. He was afraid of the sword when raising his voice in chanting, and thus insisted that it was a bad thing to chant. Others attempted to persuade him otherwise, but he would not change his mind at all. What can one do with him? Even if what he was saying were right, and others attempted to dissuade him, and he obeyed their wrong advice, this would have provided some grace, significant grace, because of his humble obedience. How many people torment themselves for years because they rely on their own thoughts and do not listen to others? No matter what you tell them, they take everything the wrong way. And it is not as if someone believed once in his own thought and the evil stopped there, but rather the evil goes on and on. and it can develop to the point of leading one into mental illness. For example, someone is building a house incorrectly, and people warn him, "How can you make the house that way? It will fall down and kill you." If he listens to the advice at the beginning, he can readily correct the problem and build it right. But if he goes on and completes it wrongly, will he then tear it down and begin all over? People still tell him that the house will fall down and kill him. He too sees the danger that the house may fall, but he stubbornly thinks to himself that he has spent all this money, that he has worked so hard to build it, and so he does not correct the mistake. In the end, the house falls down and crushes him. Can such a person be helped? If he wants to, he can be helped. But if you tell him that something is not right and he justifies himself, how then can he be helped? Let us assume, for example, that a young man is diabetic, and because he does not realize the seriousness of the illness, he imagines that it is not serious at all. The doctor tells him, "Sugar is harmful and you must go on a diet." If he follows the advice, he will not have problems. But if he says, "Even though I am diabetic, I will continue to eat sweets, because when I do that, I feel good and warm and can sleep without a cover on my bed. I can even go out in the snow." Now, how can anyone communicate effectively with such a person who insists on believing only his own thoughts? Yaronda, is it natural for a young person to rely on his own thoughts? A young person who relies on his own thoughts has too much egoism. How will he realize this? Well, for example, if he recalls a few incidents from his childhood that indicate the degree of egoism that he had from a young age, he may be able to understand it. Once I observed two little children. One took a pillow and raised it up high over his head in a natural manner. The other boy took the pillow and pretended to raise it over his head as if it were a heavy bag of cement mix. Such a gesture is indicative of a touch of egoism. But when that child matures a little and understands that this action comes from a sense of egoism and confesses it, the grace of God comes to help and to redeem him. Indeed, God is good and righteous and desires to help us all. Yaroda, when I am able to see the future development of something within myself, given my prior experience, is there any sinful self-reliance in this? Do not draw conclusions on your own. When Christ invited him, Peter walked on the water, but just as soon as his own thought told him that he would sink, Peter began to sink. Matthew 14, verses 28-31. Christ allowed it. Since you think that you will sink, go ahead and sink. And you can see a humble man who may even be able to do miracles, and yet will not rely on his own thoughts. In the country of Jordan, there was a very simple priest who performed miracles. He would read prayers over people or animals that had some malady, and they would be healed. Even Muslim people went to him for help, and he would heal them too. He had the habit of drinking some water or tea with a piece of dry bread before celebrating the Divine Liturgy, and then wouldn't eat anything for the rest of the day. When the Patriarch heard that this priest was eating something before the Divine Liturgy, he summoned him to the Patriarchate. The priest went without knowing why he had been called. He waited inside a room along with other people. It was very hot outside, and they had shut the shutters, but a ray of sunlight entered the room from a tiny hole. The humble priest thought the ray of light was a clothesline, and because he had perspired, he removed his cassock and hung it on the ray of light. The others who were sitting in the room with him saw this and were amazed. They went in and told the Patriarch, "The priest who eats before the Divine Liturgy hung his cassock on a ray of light." The Patriarch invited him into his office and began to question him. "How are you doing? Is everything all right with you? How often do you celebrate the Divine Liturgy? How do you prepare to celebrate the Divine Liturgy? And he responded, Well, I read the service of Matins, do a number of prostrations, then I prepare a little something to eat and drink, and then I begin the Divine Liturgy. Why do you do that? Asked the Patriarch. And he responded, Well, by eating a little something before the Divine Liturgy, when I later receive Holy Communion and consume the holy gifts in the end, our Lord Jesus Christ is at the top. But if I eat after the Divine Liturgy, Christ is at the bottom. He was doing this with a good thought and reason. But then the Patriarch told him, No, this procedure is not right. You must first celebrate the Divine Liturgy, consume the holy gifts, and then eat something. He made his prostration to the Patriarch and accepted his advice. What I'm trying to say is that even though the priest was given the grace to do miracles, he nevertheless accepted the advice of the Patriarch and did not insist on his own will. On the contrary, if he had relied on his own thoughts, he could have said something like this, I read prayers over sick people and animals and they are healed. What is this you are telling me now? My way of thinking is better. Otherwise, my food will be on top of Christ. I have come to understand that obedience is very helpful. If one has even a little intelligence, if he is obedient, he can become a philosopher. Whether one is intelligent or not, healthy in body and spirit or not, if he is tormented by thoughts, he will be liberated by obedience. Obedience is redemption. The greatest egoist is he who follows his thoughts and does not ask anyone for guidance and direction, leading himself to destruction. Someone may be extremely smart and very astute, but if he is willful, self-confident, and selfish, he is also constantly tormented. He becomes very confused, and many problems are created for him. In order to find his way, he must open his heart to a spiritual father and humbly ask for his help. However, some people, instead of going to a spiritual father, opt to go to a psychiatrist. If the psychiatrist is a spiritual person, he will recommend that his patients go to some spiritual father. If he is not, he will probably just prescribe some medications for them. But pills alone cannot solve the problems. Spiritual help is also needed to deal appropriately with the particular problem, thus improving their condition and preventing their suffering. Chapter 4. The Struggle Against Thoughts. Spiritual life is based on thought. Yeroda, I read that during the Italian War, the Greeks first attempted to destroy the fortifications of the enemy and then went on the offensive. This is what the devil does too. Just as the enemy, before going on the offensive with the infantry, will use the air force to bomb the fortifications and destroy them, in the same way the devil will first bomb a person with thoughts and then attack him directly. He will not attack until he has managed to break down the man's thoughts, because a person can defend himself with good thoughts, which are his basic protective trenches. A sinister thought is a foreign substance that a person must try to reject. This is a battle that all of us have the power to undertake. No one is justified in saying that he is weak and unable to wage such a battle. These are not heavy tools that one may not be able to raise and work with because his hands are weak and shaking. I don't think it's a difficult thing to see and take everything in a positive way. For example, why should I attempt to examine other people's peculiarities? It is quite possible that what someone is doing is not peculiar, but something that he does intentionally in order to humble himself. Yeroda, I am troubled because I constantly have sinister thoughts. I do struggle, but I cannot make myself think aright. Being able to recognize which thoughts are not pure, being troubled by them, and struggling to dispel them is progress in itself. If you wish to make spiritual progress, when the devil attacks you with sinister thoughts and seeks to draw you to himself, turn the steering wheel hard away from him and ignore him. Try to have good thoughts about both the younger and the older sisters who are carrying on an inner struggle without fanfare, because the evil one is distracting your thoughts in order to delay your spiritual progress. If you hadn't persisted in your thoughts, you would have made great spiritual strides by now. All spiritual life is based on thoughts. Progress in spiritual life depends upon our thoughts. Yeroda, how can I be helped in the struggle against these sinister thoughts? With vigilance and unceasing prayer. If you are vigilant, then you are attentive to good thoughts. For example, you look upon a glass or cup and you recall the sacred chalice, the Last Supper, Christ, and so forth. Whereas if you are not vigilant, your mind may wander off to consider non-spiritual things or even wretched things. For this reason, try not to gather useless thoughts, which you will later struggle to get rid of. Concentrate and say the Jesus prayer, and if your mind wanders, call it back again and again. Do not allow your mind to wander. For even if the mind is not always preoccupied with evil things, but merely neutral things, these too, nevertheless, will neutralize the mind with useless and wasteful distractions. In fact, the thoughts created from such distractions can be more insidious than the outright evil ones, because we do not always directly recognize them so as to dispel them. Yeroda, my thoughts tell me, you have not made any progress after all these years in the monastery. Tell me, what else does your thought tell you? It seems you pay a lot of attention to the devil who whispers things to you and tries to deceive you. Why do you believe the evil one? Why do you confuse yourself? Be at peace. You worry in vain and torment yourself without reason. The demon presents things in a confused, entangled manner. He fogs your mind with pessimistic thoughts in order to waste your time and distract you from prayer and attention to your daily tasks. Even if you are only a little confused, just enough to take away your desire to fight him, this alone is enough for him to be promoted to a higher rank. When working alone, try to follow this rule. Sing psalms, doxologies, and verbal or silent prayer of the heart in order to avoid the murmur of thoughts. In other words, try to turn your thoughts to God. Since the devil changes the subject of our thoughts in order to deceive us, why shouldn't we do the same thing? I've told you this before. When I'm speaking with someone and am about to say something which may be useful to him, someone else will come to interrupt, or there will be some distracting sound or something else that forces me to stop. If the tempter, the devil, devises such machinations against us, why should we not similarly devise our own defensive mechanisms? You must be intelligently vigilant in outsmarting the little devil. Yeroda, I am troubled by sorrow, by listlessness. I am tormented by it. This is martyrdom before the martyrdom. You are placing too much trust in yourself. self-confidence. Certain sinister thoughts have become entrenched in you, and this is why you are being thus tormented. You need to think straight. You have to remove the worn-out machinery of your mental factory and install good machinery. The best enterprise is for someone to establish a factory of good thoughts. Then, even bad thoughts will be transformed into good ones by his mind. For example, when you look upon a person as a soul, as an angel, you can ascend angelically to heaven and your life becomes a festival. But if you look upon a person in a carnal way, you descend into hell. Yeroda, sometimes when I think of something good and positive, a sinister thought will soon come to destroy everything for me. Could it be that I don't do this from my heart? The goal is to do it from your heart, and if you have a sinister thought, say, "This thought is a stranger. I must send it away. I have signed the eviction. It's gone. It's out of my mind." Yeroda, when I have taken great effort in expelling a bad thought, how is it that it returns again after it's been dealt with? Yes, the subject may have been dealt with, but the little devil has not finished. The devil never dies. An elder monk used to say, "If you kick a dog a couple of times, it will go away." But the devil does not go away. He persists with his attacks, here, there, and everywhere. I light a candle to the saints of Arkeli to make him go away. And the demons ask me, "Did you light the candle for us?" "You trash, why would I light a candle for you? I lit it for the saints." "Yes, but it was we who made you light it," they tell me. Yeroda, when a misfortune happens to someone and he begins to say, "Why, O God, has this happened to me? Can this person be helped?" How can he be helped? The first thing is for a person to interpret everything with good and positive thoughts. Only then can he be helped. Some people have a good machine, many prerequisites for a spiritual life, but their steering wheel is faulty and leads them in the wrong direction. If they turn the steering wheel in the direction of good thoughts, then they can proceed steadily in the right direction.
Virgin anecdote, thy truly ineffable offspring, thou poured forth the great abundance of thy cures and healings. Glory to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit. All the diseases that plague my soul dost thou make well, and the sufferings of the flesh thou healest also. Wherefore, O thou maiden, full of grace, I glorify thee.
Cultivating good thoughts. Yeroda, do good thoughts come on their own, or do I have to cultivate them? You must cultivate them. Observe yourself, scrutinize yourself, and when the enemy sends you bad thoughts, try to expel them and replace them with good thoughts. When you struggle in this manner, the disposition of your soul will be cultivated and become positive and good. Then God, seeing your good disposition, will condescend to help you, and the evil thoughts will find no place in you to dwell. The evil thoughts will be expelled, and then you will naturally have good thoughts. You will acquire a habit toward what is good. Goodness itself will come into your heart, and then you will provide hospitality in your heart for Jesus Christ Himself. But this does not happen overnight. It takes time and a constant struggle for the soul to receive the crown of victory. Eventually, the war will end for good, because such battles result from our disorderly inner state, which is exploited by the propaganda of the enemies. Yeroda, does this mean that those who have good thoughts have achieved this spiritual state of being through struggle? It depends. Some people have good thoughts from the start of their spiritual life and can thus advance readily. Others, on the contrary, while they may have good thoughts at the beginning, later on are not careful and vigilant and start to have bad thoughts. Others again have sinister thoughts at first, but by being carefully observant of themselves and seeing how often they have fallen, lose their self-confidence and begin to have good and positive thoughts. Other people may have half good and half bad thoughts. Others have more good thoughts, while others may have more bad thoughts. For example, one who goes to become a monk, depending on the environment and the conditions under which he may have lived, will have both good and bad thoughts. He may have from 10 to 20% of bad thoughts, and even as much as 80%. But when he begins to do inner work, observing himself and dispelling the bad thoughts, he will cultivate good thoughts. Following this rule and effort, after a period of time, he will attain a state of having only good thoughts. The duration he had the bad thoughts in the world will determine the duration of the time required to dispel them. After that, gradually over time, even good thoughts stop coming and an emptiness is attained. Then he goes through a period when he has neither good nor bad thoughts. This phase brings a certain disquietude in the soul, and man begins to ask himself, "What is happening? What happens now? I had thoughts and they are gone. Good thoughts came. Now I have neither bad nor good thoughts." After this emptiness, the mind is filled with the divine grace and divine enlightenment comes. Yeroda, what is the nature of this fullness? You cannot describe the brightness of the sun to someone who has not seen the stars. At least if one has seen the stars, you can describe to him something of the nature of the sun. Yeroda, what can help us achieve this emptiness which you are speaking of? Spiritual study, unceasing prayer, silence, and ascetic discipline with Philotimo. A soul who earnestly takes on the struggle against bad thoughts can attain to a more advanced state than another soul who may have had hardly any bad thoughts. That is to say, at first she may have had 90 bad thoughts and only 10 good ones, but because of her earnest struggle, she can achieve a better state than the other person who had 90 good thoughts and only 10 bad ones.
To beg of thee, that thou make entreaty unto the one born from thee, O Mistress of creation, do thou intercede for us. Now we chant with eagerness unto thee, with this ode most joyful, O all-hymned Mother of our God.
Dear listeners, thank you for listening. We will continue once again where we left off in our next show. Until then, be well.
That we find clemency.
Lord, have mercy. Lord, have mercy. Lord, have
Readings of Orthodox Spirituality.
Lord, have mercy. Lord, have mercy.
A wondrous journey into Orthodoxy.
Lord, have mercy.
Prepared and presented by Angeliki Antonakou Lekea.